Welcome to Visalia Unified College and Career Readiness, Ignite Your Curiosity. My name is Paige Leveren. I'm District Counselor for College and Career Readiness. Before we get started, I want to share with you our website. You can use either the URL code or the QR code to find our website. On this, we have all kinds of information for you. We have things on college and career, how to apply to college, how to explore for college. We also have information on the CTE pathways and the link to the Lean Academies. So be sure to take a screenshot or grab your phone and take a picture of the QR code so that you can visit that later. We're lucky today to have with us a geneticist. She's coming from UC Davis. So let me go ahead and stop sharing the screen here. Okay, so Katie, welcome. Hi there.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We had about 40 students signed up for tonight. I'm not quite seeing that many appear right now. My concern is the email issue that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, of course.
We are going to record this and then send it out to teachers if they want to show it in the classroom. So I don't want to. But we do have two wonderful students. Actually, we're up to 4 wonderful students that are joining us right now. So can you start by introducing yourself and let us know, what is a geneticist?
Yeah, of course. So first off, thank you all for having me. This is really exciting. So my name is Katie, and I'm a geneticist, just like Ms. Leveren said. And a geneticist is someone who studies DNA and RNA. And so those are the different tiny, little structures in your body that basically make up not only yourself, but the rest of the world. And so my job is to investigate that.
So when you say investigate, can you give us detail? I mean,
yeah.
Is this, it helps identify diseases or mutations, or what do you do with the information that you gather?
So a bunch of different things. So when I first started in college, I actually did, sorry, I think I have a piece of hair in my mouth. I first did animal genetics. So I actually worked a lot with livestock, trying to make them basically better for the environment. So different ways to do that, right, is you can have them produce more offspring or make them consume food and get more nutrients out of those foods. So that was one thing. And now I specifically study diseases. So neurodegenerative diseases, mostly Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. And these are diseases that usually affect, like people's grandparents and stuff like that. And so right now, that's what I mostly study. And we look for different mutations, ways to help, and also, see potentially what's causing those diseases or whatever phenotype. And a phenotype is something you can see or measure. So for example, if you have like blue eyes or green eyes or brown eyes, that's a phenotype, that's your eye color. And we can look for genes that determine that.
So what type of training did you have to go through?
Oh, I love this question. So I've been a student for quite some time. I realized this year I've officially been in secondary education longer than I was in primary education. So my parents like to joke and say I'm addicted to school. But I graduated high school. Then I went off to college, and I'm the first in my family to go to college. So that was pretty exciting, and I wasn't too sure what that meant. But I actually went to Cal Poly Pomona, so just south of y'all by a couple hours there. And I did my bachelor's of science in animal science at Cal Poly. And then I did a master's in animal breeding and genetics at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and that was another 2 years. And then I did my PhD at UC Davis in translational genetics and genomics. So what that means is we would look at diseases or different phenotypes, again, that occur in animal models and see how we can translate that information to help humans. So that's really like a common tool, I would say, in medical sciences. And then from there, I am currently doing a thing called a postdoc, and that is similar to a doctor or medical student doing a residency. And so it's kind of like doing a residency after your PhD. And I did one for 3 years at Stanford University, and now I'm doing a 1-year postdoc with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which is part of UC Davis. So I've been in school for quite some time.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about in terms of the brain, that's kind of the great unknown and still that area that
Yes.
we're still trying to figure out how it works and how we can cure diseases, like you said, with
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So very cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So what do you like the most about your job?
Ooh, I love this question. So my favorite thing about my job is every day is a different day in the sense that you're never going to repeat the same thing. So every day I get to solve a puzzle. So whether that's doing an experiment or analyzing data, everything's different. And so that I think really fueled my love for science and especially genetics is every day is different. Even if you're studying the same disease, you're always going to find something new about it. And that makes it less monotonous.
So that's the thing that you like the most.
Yeah.
What's the thing that you like the least?
So, growing up, I was really bad at English and writing, and I really struggled with it and had to go, to extra classes to get better at reading and everything. And so, initially, when I was younger, I was like, oh, I'm going to become a scientist. I won't have to write. I'm bad at English. This will be great. It turns out you do a lot of writing in science as well. Luckily, I'm a lot better at scientific writing than I am creative writing. So, I would say that's probably the place where I struggle the most is still writing, and trying to get whatever I find in the laboratory translated so the rest of the world can understand it. But I'm,
So
I'm improving. So,
So it's great to hear that. It's like sometimes students think that they have to be perfect at everything
oh
that
no.
they're going through school, and they set
No.
these unrealistic expectations that
Yeah.
they have to be good at math and English, otherwise they're not going to get to their goal. But
Nope.
that's
Yeah.
refreshing.
There's kind of a silly saying for some college students who like to goof around, and that is C's get degrees. While I do not condone the goofing around and skipping class because it is important to go to class, you pay for it, that's how you get an education. But it's also important to remember that even if you get a C, that doesn't mean you're bad. That just means you're average, and that means you're keeping up with everyone else. And that's okay to not be great at everything. I've gotten tons of C's in my life, especially during my, academic career. I've even failed things before, but that just means you pick yourself back up and you keep going. And
That's
eventually you can get a PhD.
that's great to hear because
Yeah.
again, it's that growth mindset and knowing
Yeah.
that you're expected to make mistakes and have
Oh,
failures,
yeah.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean the end of your career.
Exactly. One thing I like to joke about with my students is tell them it's called research for a reason. You're going to redo it a lot. So if you fail, that doesn't mean you actually failed. You're still learning something even if you get an F on that test. Like you're still learning, okay, what do you need to improve on? I think failure is when you quit. So as long as you're still trying, you're succeeding.
Well said. Absolutely
Thank
well
you.
said. I want to invite our audience members. You can go down to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you have questions for Katie, please feel free to type in those questions
Yeah.
as we go along. Katie, so you see when you go to the grocery store on packages,
Yeah.
non-GMO, genetic modified foods.
Yes.
So what's the deal?
I know, that's a funny one. So that, when people say they're anti-GMO or non-GMO, I think it's more just like a hype word. Like people just want to say it a lot. It's for marketing. When in reality, we have been genetically modifying food for literally centuries. The Mayans and the Aztecs were some of the first to do it, actually, and I'm very grateful for them because I love popcorn. And what they did was they found this thistle, and they took that thistle and basically would cross the plant, so cross-pollinate with other, thistles and plants to develop what we have is our nice long ear of corn that we love to eat at summer barbecues and stuff. So if it weren't for them, cross-pollinating and genetically modifying, because that's what it is, that pollen is that genetic material from that plant with another plant. If it weren't for that, then we wouldn't have things like corn and our bumblebees. They're always cross-pollinating everything. So they're actually genetically modifying a lot of stuff. So I think when people get really upset about GMOs, it's more so a fear of what they don't know or don't understand, which I can understand that. But I always say, if you're afraid of something, try and learn about it. That way it's not as scary. And GMOs are actually amazing things. So for example, There are a lot of countries around the world where there's food shortages and a lot of kids go hungry every day. And because they're not getting enough nutrients, they're deprived of it and their body can't make all the proteins and everything it needs to function. So some scientists came up with an idea and realized, hey, if we take rice, the kind of rice you might get with your like Chinese food or in your Mexican food or all sorts of different types of rice, found in different cultures around the world, a lot of Indian food. If we took that rice and genetically modified it so it would make just a little bit more vitamin A than it already makes, just a little bit more. It's already in there, but we're going to make a little bit more. They realized they could give kids enough vitamin A to prevent blindness.
Wow.
And that's amazing. We can literally cure, this nutrient, lack of nutrient caused blindness in the world with genetically modified rice. And rice is a really, cheap, sustainable food. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't like GMOs, and so they won't let us spread that rice and give it to other countries. So that's an example of where a GMO could literally save kids and people won't allow it. So I'm very pro GMO. I think we can save the world with GMOs. I think it can be a lot more sustainable, help the planet, reduce the amount of nutrients and water things need. So to help with climate change. So I'm very pro GMO.
Nice.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about colleges, and I told you
Yeah.
UC Davis is my alma mater as well. When I was there, they were starting to do the first genetically modified food with tomatoes.
Yes.
And they were trying to do is a thicker skin on the tomato so that they could get it from the farm to the market without
breaking. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So it's interesting to hear. Like you said, it's been with us for thousands of years, and it's not as new as people want to think it is.
Exactly. There's a lot of things where people don't realize that that technology has been around for a long time. And that's okay that they don't realize that. If someone asked me the history of, I don't know, sewing machines, my mom's really into quilting. I would say, I don't know about these sewing machines. How long have they been around? Whereas if you go and ask a person who's an expert in that or someone who's spent their life studying it and really trying to know it, they'll tell you everything about it. They want to. And that way you can take away some of that mystery behind it and really understand things better.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we do have a few questions from our students.
Yeah.
The first one is, did you ever deal with an ethical issue involving genetic testing?
Oh, I love that. It's a great question. I fortunately have never had to deal with that. So one thing at least I'm only going to speak on behalf of like academic institutions because I work at a university. But one thing we're really, really careful and focused on is doing ethical, good science. So for example, there have been a lot of times throughout history where people treated each other terribly, and science has their fair share in this. So an example of that would be, there was a study done in Tuskegee where African-American men were given basically an infection and not told about it, and they were left to suffer. Now, granted, that's not, pardon me, a genetic example, but that's an example of science being done wrong and not notifying the patients or participants. So in all of our genetic studies, we always make sure every participant is of sound mind, meaning they don't have dementia or anything like that, where it might mess with their cognition or their understanding of what's happening. And if perhaps that patient does have some kind of cognitive problem, we have a representative for them, whether that's their spouse or perhaps, a child or anyone who can speak on their behalf legally. So we always
informed.
Yes,
Informed decision.
exactly. Everyone has informed consent. We tell them that they are allowed to withdraw from the study at any moment's notice on their half. They don't have to tell us. They can just say, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. They don't have to give us a reason. They will never get penalized. And we also make sure that all of their information is always decoded. So by that, we mean by the time the doctors collect the data, whatever it is, whether it's a blood sample, maybe a saliva sample, because we can extract DNA from both of those. When the doctors give us that, all we know is that it's patient A and that they were either healthy or unhealthy, and that's it. So we make sure to remove their name, their birth date, their sex or their gender, anything that could possibly make it so someone else in the world could figure out who they are. So we make sure to get rid of all of that. And throughout the process, we keep updating them and letting them know, like, hey, if you don't want to be a part of this, that's okay. And we always let them know the results of everything as well. So that way they feel like they're actually a part of the science and not just being used as a sample.
Nice.
That's a really great question. I love that.
So we have another question. It says, so how long were you in college and what did that feel like?
Okay, hold on, let me do some quick math. So 4 years for my undergrad, 2 years for my master's, 4 years for the PhD, so we're up to 10 now. Then I just did 3 years at Stanford, and now I'm at Davis. So I'm getting close to 14 years.
Wow. Wow. That's
But
dedication.
yeah, it really is. But I would say out of that, it was only 10 years of true, textbooks and exams and stuff like that. And even if you may not enjoy school right now, one thing to look forward to is in college, you really get to pick what you want to study. And so there's a lot of options. And I remember some of my favorite classes were like, one time I took a swimming class, and I know it sounds really weird, but it was all about just like famous athletes in swimming and how it works on your body and the muscles and all of that. And so that was really unique and interesting and nothing related to genetics, but it was just like something fun I wanted to learn about. Or you can go take like a history class. Like I really enjoyed my history classes in college. So even though I've been in college, a long time and in school a long time, it's not necessarily always the same subject, and you can mix it up and really get to choose later on.
So my daughter did something similar when she was as an undergrad. She took a sailing class and learned to
Yes.
sail. So
Yeah,
it makes you more of a well-rounded person and
exactly.
experience a lot more of life, which is great.
Totally agree.
So from our audience, if you have questions, like I said, go down to the Q&A and put the questions in the Q&A, and I'll communicate those to Katie. In the meantime, Katie, is there anything that you want to talk about that you find of interest?
Oh man.
Pressure, sorry.
No, that's great. I was going to say, I don't know if anyone wants to talk about the COVID vaccine. I know that's kind of a hot topic and people get a little bit upset about it, but if someone wants, I can explain the science behind it. But only if people want. I don't want to upset anyone.
Well, they have the option to listen or not listen. So
Okay, that's true.
sure.
That's true.
Is that something
Okay.
you're passionate about?
I am, yes. So as a scientist, this pandemic's been really challenging, not just because of the astronomical amount of life lost to this virus and disease and just everything. But also it's been a lot of scientists have been threatened in the sense that people are verbally attacking them, showing up at their homes and stuff like that. And luckily, no one has done that to me because I don't directly work on COVID. But I can't imagine someone doing that if they were upset about like Alzheimer's disease. All scientists go into this field. And I think it's actually pretty accurate to say all of us. We all go into it because we're passionate about it and we care about it. And we want to help people. So for example, I got into science because my dad has a really rare autoimmune disease. So these vaccines have been very important to me because they allowed me to get to go see my dad, because until I was vaccinated, I could not live with the idea that I could possibly get my dad sick and potentially kill him because he's actively on immune suppressants. So anyway, yeah. So this vaccine is really cool. And people I know think it was made really fast, but it's really interesting because mRNA as a vaccine, that technology has been around, I think, since the early 80s, if not the late 70s. And that's older than me. So that thing, it's been around since before I was born. And the reason why I love this vaccine is it's actually the safest vaccine we've ever had in the history of human medicine. And the reason for that is because we're not actually taking an attenuated virus. And what that means is a virus that's kind of been killed about halfway and kind of weakened its abilities to hurt you. Instead, we took a little tiny piece of that, DNA from the virus, and we took that DNA, and that stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And those are like the building blocks of everything on the planet. And from there, we took that and then made a copy of it, like a mirror image. And that is your RNA. And that RNA, we then put into a tiny little bubble, basically. And that bubble can bring that into your cells. And then your cells read that RNA just like they would any other piece of RNA in your body, because that's how you make proteins. And from there, it can read it and make that tiny little spike protein seen on the virus. Now, some people are like, wait a second, it's making the virus in your body. And no, it's not. It would be like if I put a little bubble into your cell that could teach you how to make like a fingernail. Like you didn't make me, you just made a single fingernail, and a fingernail is not going to hurt you. So something really small like that. And then from there, once your body makes that spike, you have all these amazing cells in your body that when they recognize something that doesn't belong there, they get really mad at it and attack it. And then they remember it. And so that's why this is so cool, because now no matter what strain of the virus you could get or get exposed to, your body already recognizes part of it. And so it doesn't need the whole image of the virus. It doesn't need the whole virus. It would be like if you recognized me just off of a fingernail. And then these antibodies in the cells in your body can go and attack it and protect you. And that's why this is so amazing. And I know a lot of people are worried. They say, well, what if my mom is pregnant? Well, it turns out, since you have all of this mRNA in your body already, it's not going to do anything. It actually, you could take this vaccine and inject it into an embryo, and the embryo would still be okay. And people who've already gotten COVID, sometimes they say, well, I've already gotten it. Why should I get the vaccine? And my answer to that is you got one type of the COVID virus. If there's a mutation, your body may not recognize it as well. And then you could get COVID again and again and again. Whereas if you have this vaccine, it tells you how to make the blueprint, for any part of that virus, and your cells already know what it looks like. And so that way that virus will protect you for a longer period of time. So even if you've gotten COVID, I highly recommend you get the vaccine. Seriously, I think it's just one of the coolest things out there. I would not be surprised if it won a Nobel Prize in the future, the different technologies around this. And people always wonder, how long is this going to last? Well, the last time we had a global pandemic like this was 1918, so over 100 years ago. And the flu shot that a lot of us get every year, I got mine already, that is actually made up of that pandemic flu from 1918. And so I really think that's what's going to happen with COVID. It's going to become part of your flu shot, because the more people who are unvaccinated allow for this virus to keep growing and changing in the unvaccinated people's bodies. Because if you're vaccinated and get it, your body can quickly shut that virus down. Whereas if you're not, that virus is allowed to grow until your body realizes what's going on. And at that point, that virus is already mutating. So until the entire world gets COVID or gets vaccinated, this is going to be a thing, unfortunately. So I'm a big proponent of the vaccine. I think it's amazing. It's really great. I think it's a way of, being absolutely selfless and loving literally anyone, like being a community member of the planet, right? So not only are you protecting yourself, but you're protecting everyone else who maybe can't. So I was really worried in the beginning that my dad wouldn't be able to get the vaccine because he is immune compromised. Luckily, he was able to, but it still doesn't work as well in his body because he doesn't have those cells like I have. So by me getting that vaccine, I'm now protecting my dad. So I'm a big fan of it. I highly recommend everyone get it when they can. Encourage all your loved ones to get it so they stay safe and healthy.
I've heard some people say that they're afraid it changes their DNA.
It can't. No. So that is a great myth that's out there. And the reason why it can't is because for you to go in and change your DNA, you would require these special proteins that can come and cut it. And those proteins aren't in the vaccine. Those proteins are actually only found in plants. I don't know if you guys have heard of CRISPR-Cas9. They say those are kind of like DNA scissors. Those are very special proteins. And unless they're handled very carefully and like very specifically added to your cells, they can't. The vaccine's like, it's actually not possible. And I've worked with a lot of RNA throughout my education and in college, and it's so fragile. If you leave it out on the countertop, it gets too hot, too cold, it gets upset, it breaks, it dies. So it's actually very, very fragile. And so when you put this vaccine in you, actually that RNA is like gone within hours. Like your body just gets rid of it. And so the only thing that's remaining is those cells that recognize that spike protein after it was made. And it's those cells telling your other cells that, hey, that was a bad thing. And so that RNA is gone. And
Interesting.
so, yeah, it actually can't change any of your DNA, even if you wanted it to. And CRISPR-Cas9, they don't inject that into you. They take your, like a blood sample, for example, or usually it's a bone marrow transplant from like your femur, your leg bone, and they do it in a petri dish. So kind of like a piece of Tupperware. And that's when they add those proteins to edit your cells, and then they can transfuse those back into a patient who's really sick. But that is very, very, very rare. The government and the scientific community doesn't allow that to happen unless it's life-threatening. So I promise you, this mRNA vaccine cannot change your DNA. If you're pregnant, it will not hurt your baby or anything like that. If anything, it gives your child immunity. So that's really great. And this vaccine is actually safer than a lot of the vaccines we do give babies.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's so cool because it's actually not the virus itself. And so when you hear those statistics, like someone had a blood clot, those statistics are actually outliers. They're really small numbers of people being affected by it. Whereas if we looked at the statistics for other vaccines, there's a lot higher chance that something could happen. And even if let's say you're walking outside and stumbled and fell and hit your knee and got a bruise, you could get a blood clot from that. I mean, sometimes freak accidents happen.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything to be afraid of with this. It's actually a really cool thing. And I feel really lucky to be a part of the science, of getting it. So yeah, I love it.
That's great information.
Yeah.
We have an interesting question. Did you ever apply for scholarships to avoid student debt? And can you give us any tips to avoid student debt? And I think
I love that.
Like a PhD program, sometimes people don't realize you don't have to necessarily pay for the PhD program.
Exactly. So since I love this question so much. It's a great question. Since I was or am the first person in my family to go to college, I had to use student loans. My parents couldn't afford it. And I worked through college, but that paid for my books and food. And so I had to pay for my room and board, especially because I grew up near San Francisco and I went to college down near Los Angeles. And so, I had to move down there and I couldn't live at home or anything like that. So I do have student loans actually from my undergrad. And while I did apply for scholarships, I did not get any. My GPA wasn't high enough. So that's the one downside to the C's get degrees. You miss out on scholarships. So that's your incentive to try and get those A's and B's. But for my master's and PhD program, I got those paid for. And that's, I think, a thing a lot of people don't realize. If you go to grad school and go to most often like a scientific program pays for them. I can't speak really for the English and arts majors, but I'm sure there are programs. Yeah, it's a lot harder. But with the science programs, I actually got my master's paid for, the tuition. And on top of that, they gave me a stipend. And a stipend is like an allowance. And so it's nothing extravagant. It's just enough to pay your rent and give you some food. But I was really lucky and I got that. And then the same thing with my PhD, it was paid for. So my student loans are actually from my undergrad. And while it was scary to take those out and I wasn't happy about it, I'm very fortunate for the education I received. And I know I'll be able to pay them off quickly because of the path I've gone. So I think if you are to take student loans, just make sure you're careful about it and spend it, only on school stuff. And only take like the smallest amount that you need to live and survive. But if you can apply for those scholarships, graduate school programs, you can always ask. When I emailed the University of Nebraska, I told them, I want to come here, but I can't afford it. I'll work really hard, I'll work for that money, but I can't take out student loans. And they were like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll pay for it. And I was like, what? And so I set up, my master's program with them where they paid for it. And on top of that, I got the stipend. So I was really, really lucky. And because of that, I got a really great education.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize that when you're doing a PhD in the sciences, that anything that you do in the lab while you're at that university becomes their intellectual property.
Yes.
And so that's why they don't make you pay tuition and they give you the stipend.
Exactly.
You're going to make money off your discoveries while you're at
college. Yeah. They do. I mean, so when I was doing my PhD, I studied birth defects in dogs. And I know that sounds crazy, but we studied birth defects that dogs and humans get. And the reason why we did that is because dogs for the most part, live in our homes, share our environment with us. And so they actually get a lot of the same diseases humans get. So one of the diseases I studied was a congenital defect, meaning the dog was born with it, called neuroaxonal dystrophy. And this is a genetic mutation in Rottweiler dogs that causes it. And I actually found that mutation, and it's now offered as a genetic test at the University of California, Davis Vet School. And so if you, yeah, and so like a lot of German, so Rottweilers were originally bred in Germany. So a lot of people in Germany, in the United States, and throughout the world will send, just like a little saliva sample from the dog, get them tested to make sure they're healthy. And that way, if the dog is a carrier of the mutation or has it, they'll make sure not to breed that dog. And so Davis makes money off of my discovery, but they paid for my PhD, so I'm lucky.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of our evening. Is there anything else that you want to share with our students, advice that you would give?
Don't be afraid to fail. You learn so much by the mistakes you make in the times when you think you failed. And just because, one door closes, look for like an open window kind of a thing. So when I was first going to college, it was the year it was 2008. So another economy crash, of really good timing, it seems like. And I got denied from a lot of universities I wanted to go to just because everyone was applying. So even though I had good GPA, I worked, I played sports, everything, I had awards, I just didn't get in. And that's okay. And then when I was in college, I initially thought I wanted to go to vet school, and I applied to vet school and grad school, and I did not get into vet school. And I always have realized that every time someone told me no, those were actually the times in my life where I grew the most and learned the most, and eventually got to where I am today. I'm so grateful I didn't go to vet school, because I love what I do as a geneticist more than I think I ever would have liked being a veterinarian. So anytime you think, oh shoot, it's a dead end, look again, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If you keep working hard, you'll get where you want to go.
That's great advice, Katie.
Yeah.
And I wish more students would take that same attitude, because I think every student that goes off to college will tell you a horror story where they got their first D or their first F or struggled. And sometimes they think they're alone in that aspect.
Oh, no.
It's really more the norm.
Oh yeah. I would say if you haven't failed multiple exams or classes by the time you graduate college, then you are an outlier. Like, you are unusual, because everyone's learning. It's the first time you're usually out on your own from your parents. So, you're juggling like, oh my gosh, I have to feed myself now. My mom and dad or whoever your guardian isn't making you dinner. And oh shoot, I'm in charge of my own laundry. And now I have to balance that with exams and studying. And that can feel overwhelming, but everyone's in that same boat. So I would say give yourself some grace and allow yourself to learn. And it's okay to stumble along the way.
Katie, you've given some great information tonight. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here tonight.
Of course,
it was great to meet you. And thank you for volunteering your time to our students.
Of course. Yeah.
It's really appreciated. So you have a good evening. And
You
again,
too.
thank you for your time tonight.
Of course. Thank you all. Bye.